can still be your friend and say, you know what, we need to work on your reading teaching, your ability to teach reading. I can still be your friend and say, you know what, we need to work on how you manage behavior in your classroom. Instead of saying, Johnny, Susie, Bobby, Lily, everybody, I don't know what's wrong with you all, get out. But I protected Ms. Johnson's feelings at the expense of people's children. I get a little upset, I just want you to know. I get a little heated because I oftentimes am thinking about my own baby. Do you know what I'm saying? And don't tell me this is not possible. Don't tell me we can't be there for each other and say these things. We're here to do the work. And you know what? We just let it go by, and the problems get worse and worse and worse. Do you know why? We're not even addressing the real issue. That's what happens in problem solving. We never are addressing the real issue. Okay, I got stuck. That's on the untrue attributions. Unalterable attributions. Things you cannot change. There will be things you cannot change. Does that mean that you just walk away from that child? No. You know what? We can't change this, but what can we do? What can we change? You will be a person that you will say, not on my watch that we ever walk away from a child. There are no children that can be discarded in this world. Do you understand? We will not walk away from a child. What can we do? And that's what we will do. You don't get to absolve yourself because a child has a life that's hard. That's why you're there. That is the job. Am I giving you any magic here? No, you already know it. But you know what I'm saying today? You have permission to go do it. That's all I'm saying. You already know this. You've heard this. You know it. And you might not have known exactly what to say. I was invited here with DPI and your district leaders. You are backed to address these things. Do you understand what I'm saying? If something is not founded, we have no evidence. I'm sorry, that cannot be a part of our decision making in this process. You are saying something that is untrue, likely based on a stereotype or bias or prejudice. No, that's not true. It will not be a part of our decision-making process. You are identifying factors that we cannot change. No, we will not walk away from this child. We will find out what we need to do. That is what you are charged with in problem solving. Are we clear? That's what we're going to be doing. So let's look at some examples. I'm going to read this out loud, and then I want you to think through these questions. You don't have to say anything out loud. I just want you to think through them. So we're talking about reframing. So you're going to have situations where people are coming to you or you're working on a team, and they're going to say some things. To reframe, you have to be able to identify when a person is operating on an unfounded, untrue, or unalterable factor. Does that make sense? You're going to have to be able to identify that. So from this, can you identify what the factor is that the teacher is operating on to explain why the problem is occurring? Robert is reading below grade level, and he is exhibiting a number of disruptive behaviors in class. He is oftentimes talking to other students and does not follow directions and will sometimes talk back to me, which causes big disruptions in the class. I tried talking to him and keeping him in for recess, but nothing seems to work. I think he is getting worse. I reached out to Mom a few times, but I've not heard back from her. I know she and her boyfriend were having some problems, so there may be something there. I don't know. I'm not sure, but even if she knows what's going on with Robert. Poor kid. Poor kid. I need some help because I do not know what else to do. What is the teacher's view of the cause of the problem? Parents. Is that untrue, unalterable, or unfounded? Unfounded. How do you know that? How do you know that? Do you see what I'm saying? But you might say, Nobody knows anything. I'm like, what are we agreeing to? Right? Do you think it's a need to reframe here? And you might say, you know what? People say this all the time. If this is the belief, why would this teacher do anything? Mom and boyfriend need to get their house in order. Do you understand what I'm saying? But you let that go by, you're agreeing with it. Now it becomes a problem. Because then you say, okay, now, Ms. Johnson, we need to put this intervention in place. Yeah, with mom and boyfriend. You see the logic? The logic. So let's look. So as you said, family turmoil, problems with the home life. It's unfounded because we have no knowledge that that's true. Now, you could ask the teacher, oh, have you spoken with mom and talked to her and she shared with you the problems that she's having with the boyfriend? No. Okay, we can check that off the list as not being founded. We don't know anything about that is true. Is there family turmoil going on at home? Don't know. Okay, do we need to reach out to the parent? Do we need to find out that information? This is the thing. With unfounded attributions, you need to ask the question. Do we need to find this out? And even if there's family turmoil, does that have anything to do with what's going on with Robert in the classroom? Just because there's family turmoil doesn't mean that it is impacting Robert's performance at school. I don't know about you, but I've been in my household and there's been family turmoil, but I was able to still do what I needed to do at school. Do you understand what I'm saying? You don't make the assumption. You're connecting dots that you have no data, no evidence to connect. That's a problem. That reduces the likelihood that we're going to come up with a solution that's accurate. So if no one has talked to the parent, no one understands what's going on, no one knows if what's happening at home is related at all to Robert, but we're just going to all agree that that's what it is, you're likely to be solving the wrong problem. So when there is family turmoil, you might say, okay, what do we do? Then you're saying, how do we address that to support Robert? Do you think there's a need to reframe? I think we all agree on that. Yes, because you don't want the teacher holding that relationship. So how would you do that? Again, like I said, you can start by just asking the teacher for that evidence, asking the teacher for that data. If no, then you can say, you know what, that's not founded. We have no evidence to support that. Let's keep exploring and talk about what's happening in the classroom that could be contributing with what's happening with Robert. Let's bring it back to what's closest to the problem. That is what's happening in the classroom. Does that make sense to everybody? You don't let this fly by. Let's do another one. I need some help with the behavior problems in my class. The student gets out of their seat all the time. Sometimes they just walk around the classroom. They're constantly talking to each other. It's just hard to get them to listen and get any work done. There are a few ringleaders that get it all started, but I just don't know what else to do. I tell them to get back to work. I've kept them in after school, and I send them to the office sometime, but that isn't really doing anything. I know we've had more kids coming into school from the South Side, which is a predominantly black neighborhood with families with low incomes, and this is a different environment from what they might be used to, but we might have to do something. Is there a need? What is the attribution here? They're coming from the South Side because the kids on the South Side just don't understand school. But you're like, again, we do have a lot of kids coming in from the South Side. You're correct about that. What do we even know about that? What are you agreeing to? Always ask yourself that. What am I agreeing to here? So do we need to reframe? Yes. So we're saying that black kids living on the South Side, race and SES, because it was about being a predominantly low-income neighborhood, are the reason as to why the students are having some behavioral difficulties in your class. Am I saying that they're not having behavioral difficulties in this classroom? No, but your reason for why you're explaining it is actually one of our untrue attributions. There is no reason to think that kids are black from a certain geographic area, that their family's income level means that they're going to have more difficulty with school. It's just not true. So then what do you say if you need to reframe? You can tell the teacher that the fact that there are more black kids that are coming from the South Side is not the reason why the kids are misbehaving in your class. Now let's talk about your classroom management. Are you mean and nasty? No. We need to bring it back to the factors that are most likely to be impacting what's happening in the classroom. It's a long way to go to say, because you're black and on the South Side, that you don't know how to sit down in a chair. But we just jump all those blocks. We just jump right to it. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is the language. And the language is very direct. Do you notice that? It's saying, no, this is not true. It's not a whole, like, let's beat around the bush, run around the corner, say, you know what, Mr. Johnson, I understand. Yeah, but, I don't know. No, we're going to name it, and we're going to correct it. That becomes a learning opportunity for the people you're working with, because they won't do it again. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's why you're naming it directly, so that it breaks the cycle of this continuing to happen. So you might say, okay, I get it. I get it, Markeda. We're talking about problem solving. We're in the process of trying to identify a problem, and we really want to try to nail down why a problem is occurring. We don't want to just say, oh, the kid is having reading difficulty, put them in a reading intervention. We don't do that. Why not? Why not? This kid is having difficulty with comprehension. Let's just put them in a reading intervention. Why shouldn't we do that? You don't know why they're having a reading problem. Never skip the step of asking, why is this problem happening? Because otherwise you're assuming and you might be wrong. So you need to say, okay, we know what the problem is. Why is the problem occurring? And then once you do that and you identify that there are some unfounded, untrue, unalterable factors, we need to reframe those. We need to reframe those. So you say, okay, we reframed, we moved away from the unalterable, unfounded, untrue factors. We moved away from that. Now what? You got to replace it. You're trying to replace it with an actual hypothesis. This is more of an evidence-driven, data-driven rationale as to why the problem is actually occurring. So you can't just disrupt the stereotype, the biased thinking. It has to be replaced with healthy, productive thinking that's informed by data. That's when we get our low inference hypotheses. Are we good on that? What should your hypothesis be? It's focused on the factors that are causing and or maintaining the problem. This is your why. Focus on why the problem is occurring. This is critical. You have to have a hypothesis that's focused on alterable factors. Things that we can actually change. So whenever you're in a problem-solving process, this is one of your check boxes. Is this a factor we can change? Is this a factor we can do something about, we can impact? Yes. Not only that, it needs to be targeted either on instruction, curriculum, the task, the student skills, or management. These are the factors that are most proximal to why a student might be having academic and or behavioral difficulties in school. We don't want to leapfrog over all of this to get to the fact that, oh yeah, because they live over here in this neighborhood, that's why they can't read. You want to leapfrog instruction and curriculum and the student skills to get there? This is where we start. These are factors we can change. And then that hypothesis has to be low inference. So let's talk about low inference for a second, because it's related to the reframing of the deficit-based thinking. So low inference versus high inference hypotheses. These are factors, again, that we're using to try to understand why the problem is occurring. High inference factors are things that are more within a person. Very hard to measure, almost impossible to change. I just think the student is lazy. How do you know that? Did you measure it some kind of way? Do you have it? I just think so. I've seen it. I mean, it's just things that you can't even put your hands on. When we stay high inference, it makes it very difficult to make changes in the actual environment, because there are not many changes in the environment that impact those things. We're trying to get to low inference. These are factors that we can more clearly and directly link to the problem. If a kid is having difficulty in reading fluency, we then need to be looking at reading instruction and curriculum and reading skills. If a student is having difficulty with behavior, getting along with other kids, let's look at social skills. Let's look at conflict resolution skills. Do you understand what I'm saying? What is most proximal to the problem? That is more directly linked to the problem. That is low inference. You always start low inference: instruction, curriculum, task, management, student skills. That's where you start. You could get to high inference, but you don't start there. You always start at low inference. So let's look at some examples of what that means. Johnny is in the 4th grade, but he's comprehending at a 2nd grade level because his reading is not fluent. What is the factor in there that we're saying is causing the problem? The reading is not fluent. Is that low inference or high inference? Low. We can address that. Not Johnny is in the 4th grade and not comprehending on grade level because he just doesn't care about reading. What are we going to do about that? Oh, you know what, Johnny, you don't care about reading? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to go over here. You can go do whatever you want. No, that would be the next step. You're trying to link it to an actual factor that you can intervene on. High inference. Michelle is continually getting out of her seat without permission and talking to other students because she acts like that at home. Let me hold a podium. First of all, do you know that's true? Let's just ask that question first. Do you understand? Even if it is true, it does not mean that Michelle has an inability to learn how to behave in the classroom. Do you understand what I'm saying? So how about if we rephrase that? She's continuing to get out of her seat because Ms. Smith doesn't have clear expectations around NC behavior and talking. But again, we will leapfrog all of that and say, what's wrong with Michelle? And not only what's wrong with Michelle, what's wrong with her family and at home? That's deep. The things we really want to grapple with, I think our jobs are hard enough than trying to figure, whoa, that's like a real big leap to go all the way down that road. And then what are you going to do about it? When we go down these roads of factors that are not true, no evidence to support them, they're based on stereotypes and prejudices, we are most likely to come out with an intervention that does not work. That's bottom line. We're most likely to come out with an intervention that does not work. So we need to go in and look at actually what's happening in the classroom. That's low inference. It has to also be, so here is what the interventions are. Reading fluency, help the teacher develop classroom expectations. Let's just go back. This is the hypothesis telling us why. We can measure reading fluency. We can go and observe in the classroom. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now you have your data. Now your data says, oh, if the student is having difficulty with comprehension, they're not on grade level with fluency, that's a fluency intervention. As opposed to saying, well, you know what, the kid lives in poverty, we're going to do a small group reading intervention. Does that make sense? No. Those two things don't even match. So you're trying to get to a place where you have data-driven information about why the problem is occurring, and it is addressing factors that we can actually change. That's what you're trying to do here. And then get to intervention. Your hypothesis will tell you what the intervention needs to be. The why tells you what the intervention needs to be. It is not the what. A kid could be misbehaving for 100 million reasons. A kid could be having difficulty with reading for 100 million reasons. When we can identify to our best ability in a data-driven way that why, and it's focused on low inference alterable factors, that is telling you what your intervention is. Does that make sense? That's why we do hypotheses. So that we're not running around chasing interventions all day. So I want to make some points, and then I want to go back and make some other points. I do that, okay. I want to make some points, and I want to make some points. Before I do the summary, I want to take us back. Let's just go back. Because sometimes when you hear information, you're wondering what's going on. Why are we here this morning? What are we trying to do? We're trying to improve our ability to problem solve for kids. What are we saying is a good start point? Let's start with the very fact of how we explain why problems are occurring. When we're operating on our stereotypes, our biases, our prejudices, not having complete information, it is likely to lead us down a path that we are not going to actually identify an intervention or support that a kid actually needs. Am I saying that kids don't have behavior, kids don't have reading difficulties and mental health difficulties? No. But we want to make sure that we actually are targeting the right areas for support. That's what we're trying to do here with culturally responsive problem solving, just to start the process. So to do that, we're going to use two strategies. These are two strategies you can do right now. When I hear the deficit-based thinking, when I hear the untrue, unfounded, unalterable factors, what am I going to do? Reframe it. If it's unfounded, we don't have evidence. Do we need to go get evidence? No, we don't. Let's move on. It's untrue. Let's talk about why it's not true. I'm going to give you accurate information, and we move on. Unalterable, can't change it, but what can we do to maximize success? That's what we're going to do. After you do that, you still got to come up with the why. That's when you get into your low inference alterable hypotheses. I am going to focus on instruction, curriculum, task, student skills, management, the factors that are most closely related to why the problem is occurring. I am not going to leapfrog over everything that's happening in the classroom in order to jump all the way to the home environment or jump all the way to what's happening with the kid. Do kids have trouble in their home environment? Absolutely, yes, they do. Are you saying that's where the intervention needs to be? Then do it. Do you understand what I'm saying? We don't want to say, oh, this is hanging over here. Yeah, that's the real reason, but we're going to go over here and just pretend to do something else. Let's not do that. If we say that this kid, because they live in poverty, we're going to try to understand what is the experience of this child living in poverty. And is that at all related to what's happening at school? Poverty is one of the areas where we know least about people's lived experience. Very little. If you did not grow up in poverty, you might not know really what that means. Doesn't mean that every kid in poverty is going to have a problem. No, it doesn't. But you need to ask the question if you suspect that the experience of living in poverty is contributing to the problem. Don't just say, yeah, it's poverty. Solve that one. That's going to be most of our kids. But I know nothing about their experience of living in poverty. I don't know what hardships they're experiencing. I don't know if the kid is worrying about X, Y, or Z. You know why? Because I didn't ask. Because I think I know what poverty means. It means you can't do anything. Let's just sit with ourselves for a second. When you don't ask the question, it's because you think you already know. And when you think you already know, you're probably operating on stereotypes, biases, and prejudices. You don't know. Are my black children being mistreated? Are my Latinx kids being mistreated in this building? That is the problem. We need to solve that problem. Why do I expect kids to show up and work hard for people who think that they don't matter? Why would I expect that? You don't even work for people you don't like. You'll quit a job in a minute. I just, no, I don't like, no, I'm not doing that, But we expect kids to love all people who mistreat them. Do you understand what I'm saying? If the children are being mistreated, then that's what we need to be targeting. Let's get some PD in here about how you're talking to children, how you're treating children, so that they know that they are welcome, valued, and respected in this building. We can do something about that. That is why our kids are not coming to school. Not because they don't care. This is us really naming our truth. And we're going to intervene on that truth. Why are we marginalizing all the kids with disabilities as if they can't do anything? You know it's wrong. We do it. And then we just go on about our business. No. Why stay like that? Why stay in the problem of it? And you already know what it is. But you know what you're going to say today? Not on my watch. Not on my watch. These are your two strategies. When you're problem solving, not on your watch will people be able to allow their stereotypes, their prejudices, their biases to drive how we serve children and families. Not anymore. We're going to be nice. We're going to be supportive. Because you know why? We also hold them. We also have stereotypes, biases, and prejudices. We're not any better than the person sitting next to us. That's why we're going to be supportive. We're not going to be like, girl, did you hear that stereotype that she said? Girl, Get off your low horse. That could be you. It could be you. As a colleague, I'm going to say, you know what? That's not true. We don't want to operate like that when we're serving kids and families. Let's come up with another way. You're not a bad person. It's just the wrong way to think. Let's support each other. Let's help each other. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is there magic here? No. You can do this. You don't need to go any more trainings. No more training. You heard that, Jennifer? No more training? No more trainings to know how to do this. And what I will charge you with is every time it is hard for you to address this, I want you to think about the fact that you are fighting for kids who cannot fight for themselves. That's what you're doing. You are standing in the gap for those children. If you cannot do that, get out of the way so somebody else can.